We have our little podcast that we do, and I was like, I'm gonna play with you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. It is excellent to see the disability community from across the state show up today. It is horrible that we are doing it because we're under attack, but I appreciate the show of force and the message to the Attorney General that we will not back down. Our oldest federal civil rights law for people with disabilities is currently under attack in a lawsuit brought by our Assistant Attorney General using our taxpayer dollars. He is seeking to have Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act found unconstitutional. And anyone in the disability community who's been engaged in this work for any period of time knows that thousands of children receive benefits at school because of Section 504. People who are seeking employment with the federal government, whether that's the Forest Service or the Social Security Administration or any other of the thousands and thousands of employees with disabilities who work for the federal government or for agencies like Disability Rights Watch Montana, which receives a significant amount of federal money. So we have to follow anti-discrimination laws too. And I appreciate you coming to our building today, but this is not about just us. You'll hear from speakers from across the disability community, across our state, who want to stress how important our unified effort to get the Attorney General to change his position on this law is. So I'm going to hand it off to a number of speakers. Know that we have one simple request for the Attorney General. Get out of the case. That simple. Stop attacking our people and go back to doing your job. Your job is not to strip rights away from Montanans, but to enforce the law in Montana. Get out of this federal lawsuit in Texas. So with that, I will hand it off to our first speaker.
Give me a moment, please. Hello there, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? My name is Opal Bisa. I am a young, light-skinned Native woman in my early 20s wearing dark blue jeans and a white blouse with blue, purple, and yellow flowers on it. I use a power wheelchair that is white with pink, purple, and blue flowers on it, so apparently my shirt matches my chair today. That hadn't even occurred to me. I am here speaking to all of you today because 504 affects my entire life. I was born 12 weeks early in a federally funded hospital. Shortly after birth, I was transferred to another federally funded hospital where I was incubated and cared for. Just a shout out to the lovely people at Community Medical Center and the lovely staff at the Plains Hospital, without whom I likely would have died. And so they are all the reason that I'm standing here before you today. And then later in my life, starting in kindergarten, I received my education in a federally funded public school. And without that education, I wouldn't be standing up here before you today either, and I certainly wouldn't be a successful author and disability rights activist. Texas VBCARE jeopardizes disabled people's access to federally funded schools, hospitals, and other important services and institutions. It sets us back 50 years by attempting to strip us of our human rights to education, healthcare, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I had a hard time thinking of what I was going to say up here before all of you today, because it is so unfathomable to me that a person elected by the citizens of Montana, 25% of whom are persons with disabilities, would wish to degrade us in this way. Whenever something is feeling unfathomable to me, I usually write a poem about it. So I would like to take about 5 minutes of your time to share the poem that I wrote in response to this Texas v. Becerra case. Some of you may have already read it, but I just thought I would share. This is The Rhymes of History. To those who say the past is past, to those who say we're living in brand new times, I'll caution you, history doesn't repeat itself, but it very often rhymes. You are a kindergartner with a very bright future ahead of you. You like school so much that you want to become a teacher. But then one day you are physically barred from entering the building. How do you feel? Frustrated, outraged, downtrodden, and confused. Your 5-year-old self does not know these words, but you do know it makes you feel sick when the principal calls you a fire hazard. You are a young businessman, proud to be earning a living and contributing to your society. You are proud of your corner office and of your handsome paycheck. Every day you have to crawl up 83 stairs on your hands and knees to reach that corner office and earn that handsome paycheck. How do you feel? Humiliated, exhausted, sore, and angry, but you still go to work every day because your job feels important. How do you feel when you learn these stories are true? Disgusted, sickened, ambivalent, unbothered, or confused? How do you feel when you learn that the protagonists of these stories are members of the largest minority in the world, people with disabilities? Does your opinion change? How do you feel now? What will you do? Will you fight? Sorry. Throughout history, people with disabilities have fought every day, living through times when our mere existence was resistance. In 1973, there came a glimmer of hope, called Section 504, a single sentence which told us our oppression was illegal. But such sentences can be tricky, and the truth can turn to lies. They say an unjust law is no law at all, but the same is true of a righteous law which goes unenforced. For 4 years, our people waited to be shown that we mattered. And then we said we would wait no more. And there came a kind of peace, and there came a kind of unity, when 200 people of all races, abilities, religions, and sexualities entered a federally funded building and did not come out for 26 days. And there came a different kind of hope, not one built of false promises, burning bright and fading like the glimmer of a comet, but one built of power and advocacy. For advocacy is an eternal flame. Just when you think the light has died, there is always a small spark, a spark that kept them going as they signed out the window, asking for supplies and support. A spark that kept them going as they I woke to check for bed sores from too many nights of having slept on the floor. A spark that kept them going as the hunger strike entered its 23rd day, because this cause is more important than food. A spark that kept them going as they sat in the back of a darkened moving van on their way to Washington, D.C., and sang Amazing Grace with one united voice. A spark that kept them going as they sat in the hearing and with quaking voices made the following demand. We want the law enforced. We want no more segregation. We will accept no more discussion of segregation. A spark that ignited into a joyous blaze on April 28, 1977, when they secured the rights of people with disabilities for generations to come. We continue carrying the torch of those original 200 activists, but there are those who lost the light of 504 because it is too brilliant. So once again we gather because now is the time to get involved, to join the fight, to stop history's terrible rhyme. Thank you very much.
Just to the left. Yep, just one. Yeah, yep, just there. Maybe pause right there. I'll adjust the microphone for you. Yeah, you're there.
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Sniffling a little bit after that poem. Whew. Thanks, Opal. Throwing me off my game.
I'm sorry.
So, anyways, perfect segue, because I want to talk about why Section 504 should matter to you. Why? Why should you care? Why are we here taking time out of our day to talk about this? Why are we so upset? It's because we're being stripped away of rights. And I think to understand the why, I think it's helpful to know a little bit about the history behind what the disabled community has endured. And I'll just go through the last 100 years. I'll keep it brief. But one of the things that Opal alluded to was one of the things that was talked about was things like eugenics and things. In 1923, our very own state passed a law making eugenics legal. This is not just Nazi Germany. One of the things that Opal talked about was that history has a tendency to rhyme. When I was in middle school and we learned about Nazi Germany and we learned that disabled people were also part of those that were undesirable and eradicated, I had people in students tell me that they wish that I was a part of that group, that we still had that today. So that was middle school, and that was late 90s, early 2000s. Those laws were on the books, those eugenics laws were on the books till 1981. Also in the last century, people were put into institutions strictly because they had disabilities, not because they could not manage their own care. People had children removed from their care, their own children, strictly because as a parent they had a disability. Our community has gone through so much, and finally, years after Brown versus Board of Education, years after the Voting Rights in 1965, the Rehabilitation Act was passed, and Section 504 was passed. These things, Section 504, like Opal talked about, Section 504 allows us to have rights as students in schools with 504 plans, but it's also so much more. Those are so important, but do not limit it to just that. 504 also requires anybody receiving federal funding to make sure that the services they provide are not discriminatory against people with disabilities. That means hospitals have to be accessible. That was the first real attempt at making elections having to be accessible. These things are the foundation for every other law that was passed that protects us. The ADA would not have happened without this. IDEA, which is another even more monumentous for students, law that's more monumentous for students. It irons it out even more strictly. Help America Vote Act of 2002. These things all are built on this foundation. And what happens if a foundation starts to crumble? The house slowly starts to break down. Our foundation isn't crumbling. Our Attorney General and 16 other Attorney Generals want to take our foundation away. So my question to you is, what happens to the rest of those laws if this is stripped away? It's not good. And that is why you should care. That is why you should act. That's why you need to step up and speak up. Contact our Attorney General, because I would not be where I am today. I work full time. I'm a parent of 2. My accommodations, they all come back to this. Thank you.
Okay, let me move a little bit.
Sure.
Let's figure. Kona and I, we gotta do a dance here,
I'm ready.
but that's okay. We'll just keep dancing until we get it right.
Oh, yeah.
That's perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Shyla Patera, and I too am a beneficiary of Section 504. The idea and many of the laws that Opal and Jacob and others will speak very fondly of, and those are our bedrocks. But I'm also the beneficiary of great leaders like Judy Heumann and the 200 people that sat in as part of the 504 sit-in. Without them and many of us in Montana getting rid of, be able to have the life that I have. For the record, I was born in 1969 before the Rehabilitation Act was passed, and my doctors and my family had a discussion as to whether I belonged at Boulder River School because I have cerebral palsy and have glaucoma. But I didn't meet any milestones. My legs were very spastic, my arms too, and people just thought I would never amount to much. My parents said no, and I'm so grateful for the fact that they did. Shortly after the Rehab Act was passed, I entered school under IDEA, which is known as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And through most of my time there, I was in mainstream schools with both 504 plans and IEPs. But as people have said here, 504 goes far beyond the scope of just education. Yes, that is what it is known for. That is how we as Montanans have used it and others have used it. And Montana has always been a leader in educational services. And we had a lot of hope when the HHS and HUD rules and other 504 rules were being looked at expanding and codified into law, regardless of what administration you voted for or you support. That law and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is our foundation. But I know one thing. our community in Montana of people with disabilities, we are so strong and we will fight. It doesn't have to be with just direct action or letters or things. We can fight in our own way through arts, through different activities. I urge the entire disability community of Montana to learn about the harmful effects of Texas v. Becerra, and I definitely urge our Attorney General to realize that disability rights laws in Montana, including 504, are nonpartisan yet bipartisan. That means they don't just stick with one party and they help all of us. All of us with people with disabilities have a right and responsibility to leave our present as best as we can and build our future forward, but without the bedrocks of 504 and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and all other disability rights laws, Montanans with disabilities will not benefit. So please, Attorney General Knudsen, please consider and please drop out of Texas v. Becerra. Montanans are counting on you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Tammy Hoare, Executive Director at Summit Independent Living. And I just wanted to emphasize a couple of other comments that have already been made. But really just to emphasize that Section 504, it's not just a benefit, it's not an entitlement, it is a civil right. So I just wanted to highlight that Section 504 is a foundation for equal access, inclusion, and non-discrimination for all people with disabilities. And not just here in Montana, it's for all Americans, every person with a disability. Section 504 precludes any government-funded entity from denying access and preventing unfair and discriminatory treatment of any person with a disability. We've heard lots of incredible commentary from Opal and Jacob and Shyla about what this actually means on a personal basis, but I wanted to give some concrete examples of what 504 means beyond just education and what that means in those systems. Do you know that 504 expands to housing? So if a housing provider receives federal funds, that means that they cannot discriminate against any person with a disability. That means that their processes and their policies have to be accessible to all persons with a disability. That means that in the application process, their websites have to be accessible. So a person with low vision or blindness have to be able to access their websites to be able to get to the application process. A housing provider can't require a person with a mobility impairment to come to a second floor office to go through the interview process. They have to be accessible to all persons with any disability if they receive federal funds. That includes, I believe, Opal, you talked about the hospitals that provided care for you when you were born. They receive federal funds. Hospitals, doctors' offices, clinics that receive federal funds have to be accessible. Their services must be accessible to any person with a disability. Their services must be accessible, including their parking lots. They have to be accessible. You have to be able to get in the building to receive their services. You have to be able to receive the documents in an accessible way to you to receive their services. To get into the exam room has to be accessible. If they receive federal funds, that's what they have to do. So again, just to try to give you some examples of what it actually means for the 504, you didn't just receive 504 services. This is means accessibility and equal treatment to everyone with a disability. Even if you don't realize that 504 is something that you have benefited from, it's there in all aspects of life. And the 504 is, as Shyla just kept saying, it's the bedrock of civil rights and equal and accessible treatment for all people with disabilities. And so if the 504 falls, what's next? The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which expanded discriminatory access for all people with disabilities into public and employment law, not just for federally funded, but all access. So if 504 goes away, what's next to crumble? It will be the ADA. And what's left after that? Other discriminatory practices. We already hear the DEI and those policies that are being talked about, that rhetoric that's out there. So if 504 goes away, what's next? So our request is that our Montana Attorney General Knudsen pull Montana out of this lawsuit. And that's our request today. And we will be here tomorrow and the next day and next week and next month and next year if we have to be. We're here, and see us and hear us.
Thank you, sir. Happy, boss? Okay. Whoops. I'm not. Hi, I'm Scott Birkenbiel, and I'm the Chief Executive of Ability Montana. And everybody's getting a little bit of personal history, and 504 and the Rehabilitation Act helped me as well. I was a 24-year-old oil field worker in eastern Montana, and broke my back on the way home from work, and my life was suddenly changed, and it allowed me to go to business school. And after business school, I started a business in Bozeman, and ran that for 24 years, created 6 jobs. And then I sort of thought I was going to retire, and then I got drug into this. So this was actually pretty good. But I wanted to start out with saying that Section 504 does not violate the Constitution in any way. The lawsuit is a deliberate dismantling of hard-won progress for people living with disabilities to live and work in their communities and not be confined to institutions. There are 7 demands for relief in the lawsuit that the plaintiffs are asking for. The first 3 have to do with the 2024 final rule, and then the 4th one is they ask to declare section 504 29 USC 794 unconstitutional. Their next demand is asked to, quote, issue permanent injunctive relief against defendants enjoining them from enforcing section 504. So they not only want 504 completely eliminated, they don't want to enforce it, they want to have nothing to do with it. And then the last 2 demands ask for all their attorney fees to be paid by the taxpayer. And then they just they submitted a status report on February the 19th, just last week, that pretty much has no meaning because we've all been writing letters and making phone calls to the Attorney General's office here. And when I made my phone call, the person fielding the phone calls said that, well, the Attorney General is not against 504 and do not want to take that down. And then this will be coming out next week. So last week is when this came out, and the quote, the plaintiffs clarify that they have never moved and do not plan to move the court to declare or enjoin section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act 29 USC 794 as unconstitutional on its face. And then they also say plaintiffs have not sought and do not seek to enjoin disbursement of funds from the Department of Health and Human Services on the basis that the statute is unconstitutional. They want to borrow all it. They don't want any other funding to be affected by it. So it's just, they want to narrow it way down if they can. And as well as not having it declared unconstitutional on its face has no meaning, because they still want to say it's unconstitutional as applied, which means that, so their statement that they are not trying to tear down 504 is completely false. And then they continue to try to tear it down. And what they want to do is they want to strike down section 504 in its entirety, and they're saying it in the conversation I had with the AG's office, saying it to protect us. And so I'd like to, as a result of that, I'd want to make a quote from President Ronald Reagan. Said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And so I have a request for a face-to-face meeting with the Attorney General. And as of today, his office has not responded. So after we are done here today, we're going to deliver our demand letter and to the Attorney General's office that Montana be withdrawn from this lawsuit. You're all welcome to come, whoever has the opportunity time to do that. And and as well as we're going to do that at 2 o'clock. So all of us that were spoke today are around to talk to you or be interviewed or anything like that you'd like to do until 2 o'clock when we go to the Attorney General's office. Thank you for coming out.
If folks would like a copy of the letter and the 38 organizations across Montana who signed on to that letter telling the Attorney General to get out of this lawsuit and leave our civil rights alone, I've got copies up here for all of you. And as Scott said, we'll be headed on over to the Attorney General's office in a half hour. Thanks.
Thank you.